Roper and I and Major Applegate and Bo Kibler, we were all over in Germany doing our reforger thing over there, and in late September, early October, and we come home, and Kibler decided to stay in Germany. He wanted to go to England and just travel around, take some leave and stay over there. And we said, "Hey,
Oh, okay.
it's cool." So we get back, and we went back like a week, and we get the alert, to come in, and we thought it was an exercise, obviously,
Sure.
and so we all went in, and Kibler was not there, so we had to tell the S3, "Hey, one of our TACP guys is not available for this exercise," and they said, "Well, it's not an exercise. This is a real world operation. You need to have somebody here now." Okay, so again, the major looked at me and says, "You need to find somebody." I'm like, "Oh man, here we go again." So anyway, I called around several other TACPs up at Shaw, and believe it or not, the only one I could find, not that it was a mistake or a last call or anything like that, the only one that was home when I got it was Sergeant Heaton. He was the Tech Sergeant Heaton, and he jumped on the scale. He said, "Yeah, I'm ready to go." Now I told him it was just an exercise because that's all I was allowed to say at the time.
Sure.
So we're traveling down I-95, and we get into Savannah area, and I pull up towards the gate there at Hunter, and I stop my car, and I said, "Lance, this is your last chance to make a decision, because once we go through that gate, you're committed, and there's no turning back. And I'm telling you right now, this is not a game. It is not an exercise." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know all the details. I just know it's a real world situation, and we are deploying tonight, the first thing in the morning, and we're not coming back for a while." And he goes, "I'm in." I said, "Let's go." So we went through the gate, took him in there. This is like 3 a.m, and took him into the headquarters building, introduced him to the S3 and the Ranger guys and Major Roper and all. Everybody seemed to get along all right. And of course, then it was like 2, 3 a.m. We get our assembly call, to go to the hangar.
Uh-huh.
And we don't know what's going on. Nothing. Hadn't told us anything yet. And Major Roper had previously been to Fort Bragg for briefings, which we didn't even know he was gone. And so they come back, and it was a elongated operation before I even knew about it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But so we get into this big hangar, and I can't tell you how, I don't know how to even put it in words, but you've been in big hangars, I'm sure. I'm talking about huge, huge hangars, hold a couple of C-130s, easy. And I'm looking around, and it's full of Rangers, a couple of hundred of them in there, easily. Maybe 1,000, I guess, with the whole battalion. And there's these piles of ammunition. There's laws, there's hand grenades, there's ammo cans, there's M60 belt ammo piled up. Just piles of them in a row, all lined up. And as we came in, the sergeant major up there would say, "All right, cover down on a pile." I'm looking around like, "Me?" "Oh, you want me?" And he pointed right at me, and Heaton and the other guy said, "Cover down on a pile right now." And I went. So we just walked up, the 4 of us walked up to a row of stuff, and I can't even lift any of that shit. I'm going like, "God." So anyhow, we're standing there, and we get this briefing from Colonel Wesley. He was commander. And the one thing that stands out to this day, to me, these guys go through exercise all the time, EDREs and FTXs and CPXs, all that kind of stuff. And they're so bored with it, they're so tired of it.
Mm.
And the colonel standing up there, he's giving a little pep talk, and just short of telling them it was real world at the point, he stood up there, "Listen to me well, Rangers. This is not an exercise. I have congressional authority to shoot to kill." And that whole place just erupted, screaming, yelling, and dust coming down the ceiling. I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. And he says, "Cover down your ammo, pack it up, and let's move out." I'm going like, "Wait a minute, what?" I'm still in shock,
Sure.
So my rucksack's got a couple of radios in it and the batteries and, the normal snivel gear and all that kind of stuff. and it's already heavy for an old guy. And
Right.
I said, well, I better at least take some ammo. We had the little Gal 5, little mini M16s.
Hmm.
And I said, well, I need a couple of rounds of that. So I have my ammo pouch is 6 of those magazines in there. And I picked up a couple of hand grenades and I said, I don't want these. And then this ranger comes up to me and says, hey, Air Force, you going to take that law with you? What's that? He said, that thing there, it's a law. It's an anti-tank missile. And I went, no, I don't want it. He says, can I have it? I said, yeah. And he had 2 or 3 of them. He had them over his shoulder and hooked through his LBE gear and stuff. And I'm like, damn, dude. So, yeah, I gave away a lot of my ammo and stuff. And I said, well, I don't really need a lot of ammo. I got aircraft.
Right. Right.
So that was the attitude. And we got on there and we had, I think, six C-130s, a couple of them MC-130s, which I was in an MC-130 with Alpha Company, first Battalion. And we were supposed to be the lead aircraft going into, I guess you know by now, Grenada. And we were the lead aircraft on an MC-130, which is like, it's got the electronic advantage of any aircraft out there as far as,
Right.
knowing what's going on. Well, we're all rigged up, despite what other people have said. We knew we were jumping. We had our rigs on, had our reserves on, had our equipment on. We had everything on, and because we knew we were jumping. And we get close to the DZ, and the plane turns off. And we're going like, uh-oh, what's going on? We turn it off. And then the word comes down. There's not a lot of us on an MC-130 because half of it's comm gear, and we had a Jeep in there too. So, we didn't have any room in there. We're sitting on each other. And so the plane turned off abruptly, and word came down that they were being shot at. And so they were going around. And we said, it started getting real at that point, being shot at. What the? Anyhow, so we come around, and I think it was aircraft number 3, which was the TACP, the headquarters element, Major Roper and Applegate and the commander and all those lightly armed soldiers. Sure. And so they ended up jumping in first to clear the runway and to take up a fighting position, but they weren't equipped to do that. So anyhow, we come around, we end up coming in, I think, 4th, maybe it was 4th aircraft in. And we made the jump, ended up being just a little under 500 feet, 475, I think somebody said, 450, 475. Man. And I'd had a lot of jumps at that time. I was a skydiver, and I've made a lot of jumps, and I wasn't worried about the jump per se. But I had my ruck on, and of course, we go out the door, and you lower your ruck before you land, supposedly. And right. I remember it was just dusk. It was just getting dark, or daylight, I mean. It was just coming daylight. Sun wasn't up, but it was still kind of light. And we made one swing, and on the backward swing, I hit the ground. And I had my hands on my quick releases. When I hit the ground, I went, bam, oh. But it was okay. I was all right. And I'm laying there on the ground. I hear the gunfire, hear everybody shooting and all that carrying on and stuff. And I said, wow, this is real. So you kind of block it out. It's kind of like when you're a car wreck or something, you don't realize till later and you think about it when it comes back to you. It's just kind of, you go into that mental muscle memory type attitude. So anyhow, I got out of all my gear and I'm crawling along, looking around, not knowing where anybody's at, because we're spread out all over the place. And obviously the assembly plan is not intact because nobody jumped when they were supposed to jump. Oh, so right. We don't know where anybody's at, But I don't know how much you want to go into all that, but
yeah, as much as you want. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, because you can get rid of most of it if you want to. There was a couple of interesting things that happened during that. Obviously, that's my only claim to fame besides my UAF files that I sent to Joe. He was totally impressed with those. And so, again, considering my age and my lack of participation in all the PT that the Rangers did, right. This is where it's supposed to pay off. I mean, this is why you train. This is why you do the things that you do at Garrison, so you can complete these tasks without any problem.
Hmm.
Well, that became pretty much obvious to me. This is kind of funny, I have to tell you. I'm at like the western end of the DZ because we were the first ones out of the airplane. I was number 6 out of the airplane.
Okay.
And so I'm at the leading edge of the drop zone and on Point Salinas there. So I have a long way to go to the assembly point, which is at the far west end. And I'm thinking, man, it's going to be a hump and a half. And I'm down on my hands and knees crawling around, and I'm just off the berm of the runway, so I got a little bit of cover. And finally, things settled down a little bit, and the Rangers are getting up in their hunch position, like on that napkin back there, and they're like this, little steps, crawling along. And I'm like, this is it. This is the real thing I was told about. So anyhow, we get about halfway down the runway, and this is also embarrassing, but I'm going to say it because it's funny. I'm holding this ruck, and it was heavy. I mean, I got to tell you, you had to lean over to just keep upright. And so here comes this guy on a motorcycle, Ranger Holden, bless his heart. He's gone now. But he came down the runway on this motorcycle, and they jumped in some bikes, by the way.
Yeah.
They parachuted them in. And he came down and swung around behind me, pulled up alongside me and says, "Get on. Commander wants to see you. Commander wants to see you right now. Get on." And I went, wow, okay. So I hop on the motorcycle with my ruck on. I get on the back of the motorcycle, and as I'm reaching around to grab Ranger Holden, he takes off. So where do I go? On my butt back on the runway. I rolled off like this and fell on the runway. So he spun around and he came back. He said, "Damn, Air Force, come on." I went, "I'm coming." So I take off my ruck and set it on the bike, and he takes off, and I just double timed behind him to get up to the company commander, Captain Abizade at the time.
Okay.
He's of course retired 4-star now,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, he was a good man. So I get up there, and that's where we're pinned down behind that infamous white deuce and a half, white dumpster truck, deuce and a half type. And there's 5 of us under there, and taking some small arms fire from the hill up ahead of us. And a lot of these things that I did made that movie Heartbreak Ridge. And I
Really?
yeah, the 4 major events that I was involved in that I actually did were in that movie with Clint Eastwood. And I looking at it, I said, well, that's not exactly where that happened, but that's cool. It's in there. But anyway, we're behind this truck, and we'll land down there, prone position, and taking some fire. And I had my weapon with me, but I never had fired it yet, hadn't had opportunity. And the Rangers are yelling at me, "We need some air, we need some air, we need some air." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's me." So I get on the radio, and I talked to a roper, and he gave me a call sign for an AC-130. And so I called the AC-130. He says, "What do you got?" And I told him we we had maps. We had better maps than what everybody said we had. At least we did.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have any lat longs or anything like that. We had target numbers.
Okay.
So I told AC-130, I have target number 33, I think it was. And he says, "Roger, got that east end?" I said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "Directly north of the east end of the runway, there's a little shack right there." He says, "Got it." This is, we're taking rounds from there. And wait a minute, let me back up. I apologize. Well, no, I'm still kind of in track here. And he said, "Okay, we'll do that." And they were firing 40 millimeters at this cabin, and it wasn't doing anything. And the Rangers fired a couple of laws. They went right through the building and hit the bank on the backside and blew up back there. So we're not getting anywhere. So right around that point, it may have been a little earlier, but Sergeant Ramsey asked me, "What's wrong with the 60 gunner? What's wrong? Why is he not firing?" I said, "I don't know." So I leaned over, and Ranger Yamani was literally shoulder to shoulder with me. And he was the M60 gunner with us. And I looked over and I nudged him and said, "Hey, what's up?" Thought he had a jam or something in his weapon. And he rolled over and he had a bullet hole right in his cheek.
Oh, man.
And it went around his helmet inside. because we were jumping to steel pots back then. And told Ramsey, I think he's dead. And he goes, holy crap. So now it's really getting serious. And so the AC is still firing and it's not doing any good. And Ramsey said, we need to get a 105 on that. We need bigger ammo on that. And this is kind of interesting too. I called AC back and I said, we need a 105 on this target. And he said, well, be advised, that's danger close. That's too close for friendlies. And I told the Army guy, that Ramsey, I said, they won't fire, it's too close. And then the AC-130 guy called back and says, we're going to need commander's approval to fire on that target. Well, we don't have a commander, we got a buck sergeant,
All right.
So I leaned over. He's the commander on scene, I guess. I told him, I said, we need commander's approval. And he says, well, you got my goddamn approval, And I clicked that mic, and I no sooner said, you have. And that round went off. I didn't even get to finish the phrase. The round went off instantly. 2 or 3 of them. Boom, boom, boom. That building just disappeared. We literally saw pieces and parts and bodies and just going everywhere. It was, I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And so we calmed down a little bit after that. The threat was gone there. Now, there's still a lot of firing going on elsewhere. This is just our little segment here.
Right.
And so we started to move out, and Doc Donovan was with us, and he came up, and he asked me to help him take care of Yamati. And I said, what do you need? And he said, well, get his poncho out, because the Rangers have a packing list. Everything's in the exact same place in every single rucksack, except for your snivel gear. But so center pocket, outside pocket is a poncho. And you pull that poncho out, and it's made mainly for shelter protection normally, but it's also your body bag. And so we took the poncho out and we wrapped Yamani up in that, and then drug him back to the edge of the runway over the little berm there out of the way. And then we moved out, and I think Donovan stayed with him. The rest of us were trying to get up that hill past that building we just blew up. And there's a bulldozer sitting there. You've heard that story, I'm sure. There's a bulldozer sitting there, and this, it may have been Abazade. I'm not 100% sure, but one of the guys got in it and brought the blade up, and everybody filed in behind it. And as we're going up that hill, you could hear the rounds hitting the blade in the front. You could hear the stings of bing, 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 as we're going up the hill. And I'm talking to the ACs, getting some more just 20 millimeters scattered around in front of us. We didn't really have a target. We were just kind of blanketing the area, and till we got up the top of the hill. And once we got up there, things kind of settled down a little bit. And then we get a call. I may have these out of sequence a little, but then we got a call about some BTR 60s coming in on the east end. And I worked AC-130 on those. Now, the Rangers did take out the first one with a tow missile and stopped the 3 of them in their place. And then the AC-130 took out the second and third one.
Oh, okay.
So that was in the movie, too. That was pretty cool. And so we're still doing small arms stuff, small tactics. And the rest of the Rangers, other companies, they're moving around doing their little, search and destroy type things. And then we get another call about some guys down in the valley. There's a little building down there, a pickup truck, and they're shooting from it. And so again, Abazade told me we need to take that building out. There's a radio tower there. We need that down. I said, okay. The only aircraft you had was 2 Cobra helicopters. So I talked to them and said, gave them the coordinates that we had now figured out, distance and stuff like that. And told them where the truck was, a blue truck. It had got a gun mounted in the back of it, and there was a tower in a small building right next to it. Oh, yeah, we got that. And they're kind of hovering, so they're looking, And, yeah, we've got that. So they fired a couple of tows on that thing and took it out pretty quick. Unfortunately, one of the Cobra guys, when he was leaving, got shot down, and he didn't make it. So there again, reality is just setting in more and more. And So we got that incident over with. And then the other one that I was directly involved in was the Rangers pinned down in a building. And they called and said, they are pinned down, they're surrounded, they need air support. And I'm thinking, wow, what am I going to do with that? And I don't have any airplanes right now. You know, the ACs are up north with the Marines, and the other one's gone back for change barrels out over the water.
Mm.
And I don't have any air. And then Roper come on and says, you got two A7s inbound, Navy A7s. I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. So they come in, and I'm talking to them, I'm giving them a briefing, and this is another embarrassing moment, but factual. I said, I gave him my location, told him where we're at, and he said, I got an idea where you are, and they're hovering whatever altitude they were at. And said, okay, well, what's the target? And I said, X number of meters off the northeast end of the runway, down in a valley. It's got a red roof on it, because that's the only one I could see had a red roof on it. That A7 pilot called down and, excuse my language, he goes, do you know how many red roofs I can see from up here? And I got to think about it. Every Caribbean island's got red roof buildings, you know?
Sure.
And I'm going like, you're right. I said, well, it's the closest one to the runway. Okay, we're armed up. I said, all right, you're cleared hot on that first building closest to the runway. He says, okay. Well, he came in low. They had cluster bombs on board. And when he came in, he dropped his bombs. There was two of them. And the first one dropped his bombs, and nothing happened. The clusters opened up, but all the little bomblets just fell to the ground.
Oh, no.
And I told him, I said, hey, you're not arming up here. Your rounds aren't arming up. And I had a little bit of training with this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, you need to come in a steeper approach and release your bombs a little bit earlier, because these things aren't arming up. They don't have enough altitude to arm up. They're just bouncing off the ground. Right. And he goes, oh, now you're trying to tell me how to drop my bombs. I said, well, yes, sir. They're duds. All right. So number one left. He was out of fuel. Number two came in. I said, I copied your update. Let me give it a shot. And he came in steep, came down, pulled off. The clamshells opened. The little bomblets spun. And they just boom, 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 all around the building. And I said, man, that was pretty impressive, too. And later on, I talked to some of the Rangers that were in there, and some of those bomblets actually hit the roof, bounced off the roof, and exploded on the ground and stuff. So that was really, really close there.
Yeah.
But they all got out. Nobody got killed or injured there. And so that was my actually my last major involvement. All this is like before noon, you know. It's all in the first 4 or 5 hours. So we were pretty worn out, and finally around 5 or 6 o'clock or so, things were pretty quiet, sporadic shooting and stuff. And then we hear that Charlie Company is going to go. It's going to go over to Calvigny and do a raid over there. Alpha Company and Bravo Company are going to sit back and regroup, I guess, whatever you want to call them. But we lost, you know, a few Rangers in a Jeep attack, and a few there on the runway. But the actual air assault, only one person sprained his ankle out of all those people jumping in. That was pretty unique. But we did all that and spent about 4 or 5 days down there, and little things going on here and there, nothing big. But that was my experience there in the first couple of days. And, you know, we came back to Hunter, and families were all there and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, then I had to go back to my motel or my hotel room, whatever, my apartment. And then I had to drive back home. So I was still 2 hours away from home. So I get home and see my wife at the time, and went through all that. And then that's when I started sitting in, and I started telling her what was going on. She was kind of like, well, I've been looking at the newspapers. I got all these things going on in the newspapers. Were you actually there? I said, well, yeah, you know. Yeah, it was kind of funny. For the Air Force people, it was almost a disbelief. Now, we had a couple of combat controllers, you know, that were there. And one of them had a more embarrassing moment than I had. Going back to the airplane ride, I saw he was a buck sergeant, and I tapped him on the shoulder and says, "Who are you?" He told me his name. He said, "I'm combat control." And I said, "Oh, okay. Excuse me a second." And I took my snap hook off the cable, stepped around in front of him, and hooked my cable back up. CCT's not jumping in front of me. I live with these guys every day. You are not
Yeah.
jumping in front of me. So he didn't say anything. He said, "I don't want to jump anyhow."
Right.
So he came out behind me. And when I was on the ground laying there trying to get out of my gear, I see him coming down. And when he lowered his ruck, it happened so quickly, but his ruck was not hooked up. When he lowered it, it fell all the way to the ground. And he had a SATCOM in there. And when it hit the ground, it literally exploded. And the
Oh,
batteries and all that just boom, the whole thing just blew apart. So he was out of the game. He hadn't even gotten there.
dang.
So anyhow, I didn't see him the rest of the tour there, but I guess they stayed in the talk. I don't know.
Right.
When the 141 started coming in, I assume they took over that because that's their primary job anyhow. I
Right.
think.
Right.
But other than that, that was my involvement down there, and
Did you
my
see anybody
career.
else? Did you see like Staha or Heaton or anybody on the ground, or was it just you
Lance, I
with
did,
your
yeah.
element? Yeah.
Well, I talked to Lance. I did not
Okay.
physically see him because he was with Bravo Company.
Okay.
At one point, when I was working the Cobras, the rounds, the 20 millimeter, was dropping on Heaton's
Oh,
location. And he
that's
called me on the
awesome.
radio and said, "Scotty, they're dropping the rounds on us. The brass is falling all over us."
Right. Right.
And I said, "Okay." So I told the chopper pilots that, and they adjusted, shifted. And I said, "Well, if you hover here and rotate to there, you won't hit them." He said, I mean, very generic conversation, move over
Yeah.
here and shoot that way. And that's kind of what we did. And they did. They took out the tower and the truck and all that kind of stuff. But Lance actually had the Cobras first, but
Oh, okay.
he couldn't, for some reason, he couldn't control them or couldn't access them or something. So they handed them over to me because I was,
Okay.
I guess, in a better viewpoint. I was up on the
Oh,
hill.
okay.
Lance was down in the valley here. So yeah, I saw him. I don't remember seeing Staha. I know he was there, according to his stories.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think I ever, you know, talked to him or anything. I did
Okay.
talk to Roper a lot, obviously, and Applegate,
Yeah.
but and all my Ranger buddies, of course, I had a handful
Sure.
of them, and I couldn't buy a drink in Savannah for a couple of years after that.